Roll here because I don't want to lose it.
No, no worries.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, this is like part 2 of a podcast. Welcome, Carl Langan-Evans. Did I pronounce that right?
You did, mate. Spot on.
Right. Now I'm going to ask you something, Carl, because this always intrigues me, right? So you're obviously a man from around the Liverpool region or Dublin, part 2, as I call it. Carl Langan-Evans. That's a Welsh name, Evans. But you have this double barrel name, Langan-Evans. How do people get these 2-part names? How do you just make it up, or how does it come about?
No, mate. This is from a time in my life when my mum thought she was a bit posh. Oh yeah. No, the last name, as you correctly said, Evans, is Welsh, and that's my father's name. The Langan is actually my mum's maiden name. So my mum's family are all from County Mayo, Castlebar.
Oh yeah, not Castlebar.
And yeah, so no, it was basically at a time, I think, when it was probably sexy in the mid '80s to think that you were something probably that you weren't. And yeah, she cursed me with this double barrel name. Generally, I go around and just call myself Carl Evans, if I'm being completely honest with you, mate. But then people get confused. They're looking at your documents, your driver's license, and they're going, well, who are you? Are you Carl Evans? Or are you this guy? So yeah, no. So I might, in fact, I was even thinking about adding an extra maiden name to me 2 kids when they get married. So I'll have a 3-barrel and see how that goes.
Can I make a recommendation? You should have something like Carl Langan Stark Evans, like our Game of Thrones. That'd be a cool name.
Yeah, it would.
That'd be nice. It'd be that kind of regal tone to it. Yeah, but I do like it. You're right. It is a bit posh, but it must have been hard. Like when you were hanging around the flats in Liverpool with that name. It wouldn't be that posh then around the flats, would it?
Yeah, no, it was. It wasn't easy. And then the crazy thing is, as you know, a lot of people give you nicknames, or a lot of the time they talk. They refer to you in your surname. So it took me a good long while to be referred to by 2 nicknames via the surname. One, some people would go with Langan, other people would go with Evans, and yeah, it was tough times, mate. But now I'm a doctor, and I think I'm posh. It suits me quite well, actually.
Well, it's funny enough, because before I got my PhD, I ran an experiment on LinkedIn. I was working for a mining company as a manager, and a guy who I knew from Harvard he says, if you want to sound, he was English as well, he goes, if you want to sound really posh and be like a right wanker, he says, put your middle initial, like your middle name, the initial of that in between your name. He says, it's a big thing in the States. And when you have that, he says, and see what happens. So I put on my LinkedIn profile, E&C Dunican, and my hits on my LinkedIn profile went through the roof within a week. and then I found out actually there was another Ian Dunican anyway, so I needed to see anyway to differentiate myself, as you know. And now that I am posh as well, Karen, I'm a doctor also. Us doctors need to do something to differentiate ourselves. But I suppose one good thing I like about when I tell people I'm a doctor now, especially guys I haven't seen in 20 years, so I was in the army where I used to knock around with drinking and acted out on a Friday night to laugh and think it's some sort of joke. They still don't believe it. So
yeah, same. I mean, it's taken me, I think even to this day, it's taken me a good few years to convince the old man as well that I'm not a medical doctor. Literally, I'll get a phone call about every medical issue that man's got. It's like, just reminding you, Dad's not that type of doctor. You need to make weight. I can sort you right out. But that issue you've got with your big left toe, probably better off going and seeing one of the other doctors for that.
Yeah, quite interesting. We could get into the history of PhDs and MDs and all that, but we won't get into that today. I saw a little Twitter word the other day about PhDs are the only people who actually are doctors, and the rest are, honorary titles. And I just thought to myself, we should be more concerned with the people who have no qualifications and are calling themselves a doctor, because there's a few of those around. So
yeah, exactly.
So Carl, you're currently at Liverpool John Moores University in the UK, Liverpool being obviously Liverpool City. But you started off as an athlete yourself. What sort of sport and competition were you into when you were younger?
Yeah. I like to say I come from Liverpool, and obviously Liverpool's quite a big sporting city. The predominant sport over here, particularly seeing as we've got the greatest football team in the world, Just getting that one in there.
Listen, I don't follow soccer, so like you're not going to pull any strings with me. I couldn't care.
I was going to say, I always like to see people's reactions on that one, but no.
My dad's a Liverpool fan. He'd probably be frothing at the mouth if he was listening, but he doesn't even believe I have a podcast. So there you go.
There we go. Yeah, no. So football was the predominant sport, and I started playing that. My dad is absolutely football obsessed, and I think basically what happened was it was going to go one of two ways, because me and my brother were literally getting it crammed down our throat. We were either going to get into it 110%, which, at the beginning we did, or it was just going to put us off. And I think the latter occurred, where I was just like, surely there's got to be more to this than, more to sport than just playing football all the time. So yeah, I started kind of like diversifying and trying to get into other things, trying my hand at different sports. And as I found out, I was pretty terrible at predominantly most of them. So give up on sport for a little while, and started, as we did in the early to late 90s, started getting into the computer game culture. So got myself a PlayStation, and lo and behold, one of the favorite games that I had on there was a game called Tekken. So and the guy who I really liked on there was a guy called Baek Dusan, who was a real flashy kicker, and he did Taekwondo. And I was like, yeah, I really like this. This guy looks good. He's using his legs instead of using his arms. And then I just decided to start going and looking for a Taekwondo club. And lo and behold, it was actually a computer game that got me into Taekwondo. And then I went down and got involved with it. Fortunately for me, there was quite a few clubs around, because again, Liverpool is quite a big combat sports city. We've got nice MMA scene, BJJ scene. We're also quite good at boxing and Taekwondo. So I managed to find a decent club, and then that's how I got into it and started on the pathway to becoming an athlete in the sport.
Some people, I've often heard before that some people think that Liverpool's fighting culture may come from Ireland, given the proximity, only 35 minutes on a plane, and quite, as you said earlier on about your mother being from Castlebar, a big Irish contingent in Liverpool.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's I think Liverpool, obviously, it was formerly one of the biggest ports in the world. There's a bit of a melting pot of a lot of different cultures. There's a lot of fighting cultures in there. I mean, the Irish. We obviously had a mass migration of the Irish, due to former historical events, and there's a big Irish presence in the city. But yeah, no, you wouldn't be wrong there at all. But we have a lot of good guys in the city across combat sports. So there's quite a few of them who are on GB teams for like judo and boxing and wrestling and things like that. We've obviously got a couple of good fighters when it comes to MMA and professional boxing. So yeah, big fight scene.
Yeah, so the most probably famous ones you have at the moment there in UFC would be probably Darren Till and Molly McCann. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. So both are premier fighters. Molly is actually one fighter who I'm working with at the minute through what we do in the university. But yeah, two really good fighters who are making waves in the UFC.
And she fights at 125 flyweight?
Yeah, so she's a flyweight, Molly. Yeah, she fights at 125. Yeah.
And so what kind of work do you do with Molly then, Carl, in terms of MMA?
Yeah, so I suppose if I can regress a little bit and give you a bit of a backstory, if that's okay, as to how I got there. I
probably should have asked you how you ended up working with some fighters. So let's back it up.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So yeah, I like I say, got into Taekwondo. Did relatively well as an athlete, more so at the junior level. So represented Great Britain. I went to the Junior Olympic Games. I was fortunate enough to win gold there, and then decided that I really wanted to push towards the Senior Olympics, which for me would have been 2008. So trained, pushed for that. Unfortunately, that it wasn't going to be an opportunity for me to go. The weight division, because there's only a certain amount of weight divisions selected in Taekwondo, and the division that I was in wasn't selected. Not only that, if I was being completely upfront and honest, probably wasn't good enough to go anyway. But that was kind of a big dream and a big passion. So I ended up retiring quite early and got into coaching. And I spent a year coaching. And obviously, when I'd competed, I'd come to university and I was given a scholarship at Liverpool John Moores. That's how I kind of ended up at LJMU. and I was given access to strength and conditioning and sports science support, nutrition, physiotherapy, and it just absolutely changed my career. It was really fundamental. So when I started coaching, I was like, this is the sort of thing that my athletes need to be engaging in and getting involved in. And at the time when I was coaching, the club I was working with weren't particularly affluent. They didn't have a lot of money. So it was like, well, I'll just go back to university myself and try and learn this stuff. So I went back and did a master's degree in sport and exercise physiology, picked up accreditations in strength and conditioning and things like that. Got exposed to Professor James Morton and Graham Close in terms of nutrition and just started getting into that background. And then, following on from that, I got into doing a PhD. So I'm sure we'll dig into that a little bit later on. But PhD was around weight making in combat sports. And just as a byproduct of that, really, Ian, a lot of the local fighters, they heard about the work that I was doing. And I was talking to somebody about this the other day. I think I get a bit of double respect. One, for being an academic, but two, probably because I know a lot of these guys would be involved in the combat sports scene. And then, one of the fighters was Molly. So I've been working with Molly now for about 18 months. Her first dip into the UFC was a little bit disastrous. So her first competition that she had, which was actually held in Liverpool, so UFC Liverpool, she had a really bad weight cut. So I think she had to lose 11 pounds the night before. It was quite widely publicised that she failed that weight. She had to forfeit, I think it was 30% of her purse. And then in the bout herself, she ended up losing by submission. She got choked out by Gillian Robertson. So after that, she went on a little bit of a hiatus, and then she had a change in a nutritionist. And her nutritionist, the guy who I work with very closely now, Paul Reed, came and sought me out and brought me on board. And then, we've just been working with her ever since. And since that time, she seems to be doing really well. She's on a 3-fight win streak now, and is pushing towards that top 10, which is great.
And has she got a fight coming up? I know there's been some talk about her. I hear the guys on the Fight Disciples. I don't know if you listen to the Fight Disciples podcast. I hear those guys talking about her a bit.
Yeah, I do. I'm good mates with Nick Peet off Fight Disciples.
Oh, yeah. Let's just pause there now, right? Let's just pause there now, because I actually got onto the Fight Disciples podcast by accident. I'm going to take a little detour here. Now, I love listening to the Fight Disciples every week, mainly because Nick Peet is a fucking idiot. And I mean that with all due respect. He is one of the fucking funniest idiots I've ever come across, right? He's brilliant. And I listen every week to see what he's going to pronounce wrong. I don't know if you remember a few weeks ago, I was playing it to my wife. I was going, do you know what this is? I think it was a spatchcock chicken or something. Yeah. I don't know what he was calling it. I don't know what he was doing it. But last night as well, I was listening to their podcast last night. And it's brilliant. I ended up tweeting at him because he said that Trevor Whitman was Mighty Mouse's coach, and Trevor Whitman used to say it was like playing a computer game. I wrote on Twitter, love your work. In today's podcast of PD_editor, it was Matt Hume, not that coach Mighty Mouse, not Trevor Whitman. I said, you do crack me up. But that man, for an editor, it's quite ironic that his name is PT Editor and he mispronounces every second word. But you know what? That man makes me laugh so hard every week. I listen. I don't know if he's doing it on purpose or what it's like, but I tell you, man, he makes me laugh so hard. If you haven't listened to Fight Disciples and you're an MMA fan, and if you can handle, Northern English lads going off, listen to these guys because they are funny as fuck.
They're all good guys. But Nick's a great guy. He's obviously been involved in the MMA scene for quite some time, and he's also on the English MMA board as well. But it's a great podcast, and they do a fantastic job of publicising, especially a lot of the fighters in the region. But so Molly was this was quite tough. Molly was one of the fighters who was billed to compete at UFC London, which obviously got called off. That was an extremely stressful time for her leading in. But because she was one of the last events to be cancelled, I think on this new Fight Island that they're talking about putting together, or that they have put together, she's going to be one of the first picks to go over and compete. So no official date as of yet, but she's literally in a backyard in camp training. and making sure she stays on top of things in case she gets the call up.
You don't know where Fight Island is, do you? You know, no insight, no.
I don't.
No?
Everyone's trying to find out, and no, I really do not know. I don't even think the fighters get told until they actually. It's one of them, get blindfolded and flown in kind of thing.
It'd be like that SAS show, you know. They'll have a guy doing the voiceover going, Francis Ngannou was taken out the back by Ant Middleton and questioned about his past. It'll have a voiceover like that on it. I actually think it might be not an island like we think it is. I don't think it's an island offshore. I think it might be an island on a lake.
Yeah, potentially.
Or an island in a river. So it might be the classic island where, because people are like, oh, it's in the Virgin Islands, it's in, the Bahamas, it's here, it's there. I think it might be in a lake. Yeah,
it could well be. I mean, they're being really cryptic about it. I know Dana's obviously building it up quite big in terms of, he's got everything set up, accommodation and training space and places to compete. I know they're also really working with the Nevada governor as well to use Apex. Obviously, they've got Apex built out in Las Vegas, and it seems a bit of a shame, particularly if you can do it behind closed doors, for them to not be able to utilize that. But no, it's going to be interesting how it plays out, and I'm sure like a lot of MMA fans, I was absolutely made up to see the event happen the other night and get a bit of little shred of normality back to things in this crazy situation.
What did you think of that main event, by the way, as a sidestep?
Mate, it was. I think someone said this the other day. In fact, I was watching a podcast by Eddie Hearn, Matchroom Boxing, and he was doing it the other day, and he was talking to some guys. It was a bit disturbing. I actually thought watching Tony take that much punishment. Speaking of another Tony Bellew, the boxer, was on the podcast with Eddie, and he said it was really actually frightening to watch that guy just get beat up for pretty much 4.5 rounds by Gaethje. But yeah, I don't think there was any doubt that we can say Tony's tough, but I just thought it was going to be a bit more of a contest. But yeah, Gaethje, I think it was a combination of factors. I think Gaethje has been massively underestimated for how good he actually is, number one. But I also think, and I know Tony mentioned this, it's been a long camp for that guy. He's obviously been preparing since November. He crazily made weight 3 weeks ago for a fight that didn't happen, which probably wasn't the best idea as well. So yeah, no, not taking nothing away from Gaethje. It was a brilliant performance, and he absolutely beat that man to death. But yeah, I don't think that was the best version of Tony that we saw either. But yeah, it was crazy, absolutely crazy.
I think it's an interesting thing you say there, because respect to both fighters, awesome to watch, and it's a great fight, and I'm a big fan of both of those fighters. But I think you're right. I think another thing as well that the lads on the Fight Disciples spoke about, which is an interesting thing, Tony making weight over 2 or 3 weeks ago as a kind of a point, or he was making a point that that he was on weight, that weight cut, doing that, whilst admirable, may not have helped his cause, and having a long training camp. I think that's part of it. I think then
and bearing in mind, bearing in mind, I think he probably did it as well, not really knowing that this event was going to happen. So he was proving that point, and we all know what Tony's about. We know what type of character he is, and I think he's trying to prove the point that he was ready, and he was ready to go and fight. But for sure that would have had a big knock on. But yeah, I was really overwhelmed by how one-sided it actually was. It was crazy fight.
Yeah. And I actually thought that Justin Gaethje's gas tank wouldn't last the 5 rounds. I thought in round 3 it would start turning, but he kept a nice pace. I thought he was very well controlled. Trevor Whitman was telling him to just take the edge off the punches, and when he was hitting him, it was actually I actually enjoyed watching it with no crowd. You could kind of focus on the fight from a technical perspective. I actually enjoyed it. I was probably more engaged, because sometimes I find a crowd with the screaming and roaring gets a bit annoying, and kind of zoned in, and hearing those crack of those shots, you could really appreciate like how hard these guys are getting hit. And they're at 70 kilos. They're probably in the octagon at like probably no more than 80 kilos. So not massive guys, but by God, could they crack, and you could hear it. But I was also surprised as well why Tony Ferguson did not attempt to take it to the ground at any stage. It was quite interesting. I thought he would have went for something. He's very good on the ground, very crafty. He's got some crafty entries, you know. And we know Justin Gaethje's an excellent wrestler, but he's probably hasn't been really tested from a submission point of view from what I have seen in the UFC. So I'm surprised that Tony didn't take it down there after 2 or 3 rounds. So.
Yeah, I think it might have been, like you say, you know, Gaethje's been wrestling since he's 4 years old. He's very, very, very accomplished. You know, he's got absolutely fantastic takedown defense. And as you say, you know, Tony is you look at his, you know, his record, some of the submissions that he's made are absolutely fantastic. So I don't know whether it was a case of that both of them were expecting the other to kind of counter that game and thought, you know what, I'm just going to stand it up because they're expecting me to take it to the ground. Or, but like you say, you would have expected Tony, given that, you know, Gaethje, because I mean, Gaethje's one of them guys who wants to keep it standing up. He wants it to be tough. He wants it to be a brawl, a fight. You know, so why he didn't change tack? But again, I think it was probably Tony's character about trying to prove a point of how tough he was. And, you know, it's like, well, I wanted to be a stand-up as well. But yeah, I think you're exactly right, mate. It really surprised me. He could have just, I mean, even if he'd have, in the earlier rounds, have either changed tact and tried to do that, like you say, just to gas him a little bit and then bring it back up and fight, it just seemed really strange. But yeah, it was certainly entertaining to watch. But man, like you say, without the crowd, just watching that punishment and listening to those shots. And then, I mean, another funny one is that, you know, the guys on Eddie Hearn's podcast were talking about this as well, how not having a crowd just changes the perception of certain fighters, you know, whether they're able to manage that or not. You know, some people really thrive and feed off the energy of the crowd, and then, you know, to other people it's just kind of like sparring, you know, so it's a bit different. But yeah, different dynamic, and yeah, good fights. Well, pretty much the majority of the fights were brilliant to watch. So yeah, good.
It was nice. It was nice to have a few fights on, and we got some more this week coming up as well. Before we move off the topic of this, I have a prediction, and I'm gonna publicly put it out here now, which I think will be a wise choice to make. And you can tell me what you think about this, Carl, as an MMA fan. I think Gaethje versus Khabib for the undisputed title, co-main event, Ferguson versus McGregor. That way, if one drops out of either, we out of the main event, we can promote someone up. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I think McGregor-Tony would be an absolutely brilliant fight. It's listen, at the end of the day, we want to see Tony fight Khabib. We want to see Tony fight McGregor. We want to see McGregor fight Gaethje.
Exactly.
You know, so exactly like you say, those are 4 guys we want to see fight each other. I think someone mentioned the other day, though, and this might be a valid point, looking at the punishment that Tony took, do you think he's going to be the same guy ever again? Do you think he's going to be the same fighter? Because that was some punishment he took the other day.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It was it was crazy to watch. If anybody hasn't watched it, I'd encourage you to watch it if you're a fan. And if you're not a fan, don't watch it, because it's pretty gruesome. If it's your first MMA fight to watch, it's pretty. He was nearly out on his feet there towards the end. I've never seen him look like that. You know, I hope he comes back. He's good to watch. I do have actually some questions about it, which actually is a nice segue into training and training load and physiological kind of approaches to fighters, because I actually wrote an article myself and Sonny Brown. I don't know if you listen to Sonny Brown's podcast here in Australia. He's got the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Pretty interesting guy, kind of talks about philosophy, martial arts and so on. He's got a great YouTube channel where he breaks down fights. But myself and Sonny wrote an article for BJJ Scout, I think about a year and a half ago, talking about Tony's approach to training. It seems like he never stops. Like he just has, his training camp goes for weeks and weeks, and it's 120%. He's out running at like 4 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. He's hitting bits of wood. He's doing these crazy routines. If you follow him on Instagram or any sort of social media, he does crazy sorts of ballistic exercises. It's a wonder like he's not walking around, you know, injured the whole time. Well, he did have an injury obviously a while ago. You got to think maybe lack of sleep and maybe overtraining would have led to this. What's your thoughts on how these fighters actually approach their training load and recovery? It's a very broad
Yeah.
question, but we can
Yeah,
explore that.
it's a great question. I suppose I can answer it from a couple of different fronts, really. So, I mean, my predominant interest is on the weight making elements of what these guys do leading into competition. But I have managed to do a lot, a fair amount of inquiry into the training, and then I've also done some sleep measurements, which we can probably talk about a little bit later on. More so, I know you obviously did that great study where you looked at it in the combined study that you did with Reed, looking at the effect of the water load acutely. I've got some nice sleep data that we looked at over 8 weeks, looking at the effect of the overall energy availability on that. But going around houses, and to answer your question, we've got myself and Professor James Morton have got a great PhD student at the moment, a guy called Chris Kirk. He actually presented at the ACSM special interest group for combat sports yesterday, and he's looking into this in terms of the way MMA fighters, train. But before I get into that, my personal opinion on it, and I think it goes back to what we were discussing earlier, I think it's archaic. I think it's crazy. I think there's still a lot of this no pain, no gain, if you're not crawling out of the gym kind of thing, you haven't trained enough. I don't think the concept of recovery or, super compensation from training is even a thing that exists in a lot of, athletes and coaches' minds. So yeah, going around the houses, I just think it's crazy. They obviously need to be very conditioned. They obviously need to be very fit, especially in an event like MMA where you've got so many broad disciplines. But when you're going to take that amount of punishment, you also need to be smart. I think a lot of combat sport guys get really frustrated when it comes to sports scientists because immediately they think, oh, well, you're just going to tell me to do less. And it's like, no, I'm not going to tell you to do less. In certain instances, I'm going to tell you to do more, but when you need to do it and appropriately, around in order to recover and enhance what we're trying to do. But no, Chris's PhD at the minute is bringing out some fantastic work. Like I say, yesterday he presented and, he showed he went around 4 separate gyms in our local area, some high level gyms who all train in different ways. But he's basically predominantly showed in that study that total training time, and this is irrespective of whether you're competing or not, but total training time week by week, exactly the same. Total training time, Monday to Friday, exactly the same. Training load, the same. So then monotony and strain are exactly the same. And it's just, I just don't think these guys definitely technically understand how to train, but I don't think they know how to train physically to condition themselves for the event. I mean, bearing in mind, we don't particularly have a great understanding of the physiological underpinnings of the demands of the event because it's really difficult to measure. But I just don't think they've got a good understanding of that. So yeah, when you see a lot of these guys doing some crazy shit, it's just like, you wish that they just listen to some better informed guidance. There's a time to be rough and tough, but there's a time to be smart as well.
So this is an interesting thing, Carl, because like you said, there's no real, probably verified or validated approach to this. But I'm not a physiologist, right? But I've been doing martial arts most of my life and playing rugby and being involved in, crazy events like long distance running and so on. And I obviously have my own ideas as a fan and as a scientist and, then as an amateur athlete. One thing I often say to guys when they often say to me, the question will be, how should I train for a fight? What's the best way? And the next sentence out of their mouth, which I know is coming, because I heard on Joe Rogan, you're best off doing this, this, and this. And I heard on Joe Rogan, you're best off doing, your weights in a camp and, doing, basically eating during this period and going paleo and going keto. And it's like, you can't do 4 diets at once, right? So anyway, the question I said to them is, what type of fighter do you want to be? And they go, what do you mean? I go, what type of fighter do you want to be? Do you want to be like a Nick Diaz, where nobody can take the wind out of you? You're going to go all day long. You're going to pepper people with shots. You're going to wear them down. And the longer the fight goes, the better you feel. And the better you feel, the longer you can go. Do you want to be that type of fighter where you pepper guys away and then drag them to the ground and choke them? Or do you want to be, a Francis Ngannou, where you go in and you just windmill guys and try and knock them out in the first minute? Or do you want to be more like a GSP, really explosive and take guys to the ground? Like, what kind of fighter do you want to be? And it's really interesting Because it just I just want to do MMA. Yeah, but what kind of fighter do you want to be? And they cannot articulate what type of fighter you want to be. And so, from my opinion, is like, you need to understand what fighter you want to be and what fight style you want to be, and then you train to be that fighter. Now, if you don't know what type of fighter you want to be, I'm sure your coach probably would say to you, Carl, you're better at the stand-up. Ian, you're better on the ground. I'm sure a good coach or a decent coach would know after working with you, even just in the gym before a fight, what type of fighter you want to be. Like, I look at myself and I think good VO2 max, good on the ground. I'm probably going to want rudimentary striking to keep it going, keep out a person's way. When I get a chance, I want to close the distance and drag them to the ground. You might be more of a guy, Carl, that's a striker, which you are. Yeah. You're like, right, I'm going to go in and I'm going to absolutely light this dude up and give him no space and take the wind out of him. So that's a kind of a comment I'll often ask. I kind of retort to your question.
Yeah, you have absolutely 110% hit the nail on the head there. In fact, I'm so glad that you've said that, because in independence, we don't know a lot about the event. We don't know a lot about the physiology. We don't know a lot about a lot of things. But what we do know, so prior to going to the whole point of what type of fighter you are, the event is minimum 3-5 minutes round, so it's 15 minutes long. One of the big things that absolutely drives me and a lot of the guys in John Moores crazy is that these guys just won't do any aerobic based conditioning. And it's like, look, you don't need to measure the physiological interactions of what happens in an MMA fight. You just got to look at classical physiology to know that a 15-minute event that's interspersed with, actions of high explosivity, grappling, potentially continuous work along 5 minutes with limited recovery is going to be a combination of energetic system demands. But if it goes the whole 3 rounds, and particularly if it goes the whole 5 rounds, as you've just said, you're going to need an engine. So you're going to need you're going to need to be aerobically fit. What drives me mad about a lot of these guys, and this is some of the great work that I say that Chris Kirk's doing, is they're just not willing to do that. They're just not willing. A lot of it is about, well, I'll get fit sparring, or I'll do hill sprints, or I'll do track, and it's short duration, and you're like, you're fighting for between 15 to 25 minutes long. And like you say, that's if it goes that long. That's where, ultimately that's worst case scenario. But you've just hit the nail on the head. One of the first conversations that I ever had with Molly's coach was, and I think this really surprised him. And Molly's coach, Paul Rimmer, is absolutely brilliant. He's one of the few coaches that I've worked with in combat sports across the years who really adopts this now and really understands it and how it's going to add to what he's doing. And as you said, someone was like, right, how's the fight going to go? And he was like, what do you mean? I was like, well, how have you prescribed how she's going to fight this opponent? And he was like, well, yeah, I know what I wanted to do, but why is that important to you? And I was like, exactly like you said. I was like, well, is it going to go the full 3? Is it going to be a grind out? Does she need to have the longevity to keep going? Is she going to be standing up predominantly? So is it a kind of stick and move fight where you want her to be in and out and moving all the time? Is it going to be a fight where she's got to grapple and defend? Is it going to be all the above? Is it going to be an absolute all-out war for the 3 rounds? That is going to dictate how we're going to train from an S&C perspective in the gym, and also how we're going to do a conditioning. And he was just like, this is fantastic. So he explained, and he was like, this is the way I wanted to fight. This is what we wanted to be able to do. And every single fight camp now, it's like, okay, Rim, how's she fighting for this event? And he lays it down to me, and that is how the conditioning is prescribed for this athlete based on the way they need to fight. And you, like say, mate, you've just put it straight to the point there. What makes Diaz so good in terms of the fact that he's just got an engine. I mean, I don't think a lot of MMA fans actually know this. The guy does triathlons.
Yeah,
he's an absolute beast. He's an endurance athlete. He's crazy the longevity that this guy's able to go. But it's not just magic. He doesn't go around smoking pot all day and just have the lungs of a marathon runner. He actually trains to get that. So yeah, mate, that's the big thing with it. But you know, the biggest bugbear for me is if it's going to go the distance. Because like I say, it's okay for Ngannou. If you're going to be in Ngannou and you're going to put them away in the first minute, then no, you don't need an engine. You know, you just got to be a big, strong, powerful beast that with dynamite in your hands to put them away. But as we've seen with Ngannou, when it goes the distance,
Exactly,
and he has to, yeah, exactly, when it goes the distance, you know, and he has to defend the takedowns or he has to work in the ground, he's done for, because he just hasn't got the diversity to be able to put up with that, you know. So you're exactly right, mate. What type of fighter do you want to be, and that should dictate the way you're gonna fight. I mean, it's similar to what we do with the pro boxers. You know, it's like, what type of fight do you want this to be? You know, do you want to be on them every second of every minute of every round, or, you know, do you want it to be very offensive? Do you want it to be very defensive? And it is amazing. You can really, really, really win fights against better opponents through just conditioning as well. You see it all the time. I'm very fortunate that I work with another really good fighter in Liverpool, a guy called Jazza Dickens, who's in the MCK Golden Contract Super Series tournament. And he fought a very good guy in the semi-finals of that, called Lee Wood. And we worked on this guy's conditioning. Like, I mean, this guy's a bit of a freak anyway, to be honest. He comes in with a ridiculous VO2 at the start of camp, but by the end of it, this guy's VO2 was like marathon level. It was like you could literally go out and be a decent middle distance runner at what you've got.
So what sort of VO2 max, Carl, did he have?
So he started the camp. I mean, like I say, this guy is a freak. He's Jazzed is a freak, but he started off at 62. And at the end of camp, mate, he was 74.
Jesus. Now, for anybody listening, doesn't understand VO2 max or what it is, but it's basically a measure of your aerobic capacity. And anything over 55 is what you classify as superior. So
it's good.
Yeah. And so you generally, I think Lance Armstrong was like 69 or 70. So, you know,
So
at the very end of the...
Yeah, this guy was fit anyway, as you say, because over 55 is pretty good. You know, a lot of combat sports athletes, they come in and, I mean, I've had combat sports athletes come in at the beginning of camp and get like 42. You know, so if you can get them into the 50s, you're doing very, very well. But yeah, his opponents, he went out and he set a pace. It was a lightning pace, and his opponent was like, I kind of laid back and rested and took it and let him win the first 3 or 4 rounds, because I just thought, he's going to tire. You know what I mean? He won't be able to keep that up all night. He said, and it was by the time I got to about like the 5th and the 6th, he was like, shit, this guy's not slowing down. I'm going to have to start. But by that time, it's too late. It's done. The fight's over, because he set the pace and now you're trying to get into the fight. So, no, mate, you're right. What type of fighter do you want to be? And that is going to dictate the way you need to train.
You know, Carl, I really realized a few years ago, and not that I was having any fights, but I realized that how important physical conditioning, particularly aerobic conditioning, was for combat sports. So about maybe 4 years ago, I had finished a sort of a training regime, about 6 months for a 100K run. And I finished a run and I've hit my time that I wanted to do. I finished in sort of the top 15% and I was really happy. But I decided in the off season of running across the winter, I was going to do something different. Now I constantly train jiu-jitsu all year round as well. But I thought, I'll do some boxing. There was a Cuban boxing place in the city. And my VO2 max is quite good. Like, I think I had it tested that year before this 100K run and I was sitting at 69. So fairly decent engine on me. Yeah. And so I was in this Cuban boxing gym. I'm very rudimentary striking, right? But we're doing these just like body sparring drills and just moving around. It's a small little place. And of course I was just jumping around. I'm not that big, but not that small either, about 78 kilos and 5'10". And the guy I was with just went to me, can you just stop? And I went, what? He goes, you're not doing proper footwork to get out of the way. He goes, just stop. I said, if I stop, you're going to hit me. He goes, yeah, because you're not boxing correctly. I was like, fuck that. I'm not going to stand there and get hit by you. And I just had that kind of thing. And the walking home that evening was, even if you're not a very good striker, you know, you're not well trained or not very defensively, if you have a good engine, you can still get out of the way.
Oh, mate,
you know?
I agree. I have this debate with some coaches sometimes in terms of the the famous guys once said, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face, right? And and that's absolutely right. You know, you can't train a chin, you can't condition it. That's something that you've got to have. But I tell you now, mate, very, very similar story to yourself. I've beaten some very, very good guys in my past career. who were far better than me, purely just because I had a better engine. And there is no better feeling on planet Earth than when you're fighting someone and you start getting through that bout and you're looking at them and you're going, you're done. I've literally got you. I could keep this going all day long and you are done. It's over. You know what I mean? The fight's over because you just can't keep up with this pace. So yeah, mate, I completely agree. It's and again, in terms of working with Molly, I mean, the great thing about Molly was her background was boxing. So, you know, a lot of people think that, you know, me and the team, you know, turning her fortunes around was some kind of genius. It's not. It's just simple, basic, you know, training principles. One of the first things that we got her to do is we got to starting back running again. And she, you know, she's running that well now. She's like running half marathons and things like that. And she's just able to maintain a pace throughout a fight for as long as she likes, because she's just got such a good engine. You know, she's a good fighter anyway. Can strike, can move, but she's got a good engine on her. So yeah, and I think from an athlete perspective with me, I kind of learned this probably through a little bit of trial and error, because I remember when I first started training. It's funny this actually. You know, in Taekwondo, and Taekwondo's obviously it used to be a 3-minute event. Now it's a 3-2-minute event. But the answer back then was just running. It was like run and run and run and run. You know, I was probably a decent little middle distance runner when I first started doing combat sports. But then lo and behold, you're getting into the round, and you know, you're getting to the end, and it might have been quite a high intensity, lot of actions, and you are buggered. You're like, what the hell is going on? But then you'd last throughout the whole fight, you'd be okay, and then your recovery in the minute would be phenomenal. You'd be like, oh, I feel great now. And it was like, oh, and then, you know, the coach probably by some miracle stumbled upon high intensity interval training, and he was like, right, we're going to try this out. So we start doing hits and hits and hits and hits, and it was like, okay, this is great. And then lo and behold, we're all in the round, and it's like, oh, I'm able to go for the 2 minutes, but Jesus, that third minute, I am done. I'm buggered. And why is that? Because we've stopped running, because we haven't got the aerobic pace. And it wasn't until the end, mate, that we really started to figure out, you know what, if we do this in combination, that's the answer. You know, we need to challenge the physiology of what's required. But yeah, mate, you're right. These guys train crazily. I think a lot of the time they really overdo it. You know, they're not periodizing appropriately. They're not training in order to condition themselves smartly and for the type of fighter that they need to be, and that leads on to some really negative effects in health and performance. One of which is obviously sleep.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like that's a nice segue there, because Carl, I'm looking here at Molly just as an example, because you're working with her. Like, she had one fight there in London. Sorry, she had her first fight there in Liverpool, then she had a fight in London, and then one in South Carolina, and then one in Boston. Now, one of the reasons why I invited Carl on the podcast, because Carl is the very first person I've ever seen present data around sleep with MMA athletes. I've had some conversations with Dr. Corey Peacock, who I had in the podcast before, who works with people like Michael Johnson. He's worked with Rumble Johnson at light heavyweight. He works with Michael Chandler. He works with boxers as well in South Florida. So Corey's probably the only other person as well who has collected sort of sleep data and looked at those variables as well, and taken more of a scientific approach to training athletes. But one of the things that a lot of these fighters experience, and I've had a few chats to different fighters about this, is jet lag, obviously. So you've got sleep while you're at home in training camps, you've got sleep around the recovery, and then you've got the whole jet lag issue in sleep as well. And so we just had a paper published a few weeks ago in the British Journal of Sports Medicine reviewing all of these strategies. And what's really interesting in that is that there's basically sweet FA out there on interventions to manage jet lag in athletes. But I suppose, Carl, how do you monitor sleep with these athletes, and what sort of work do you do with them around trying to improve sleep? Because you've spoken there about the physiology part, like the strength and conditioning part, which is like, you know, what I always say, I was like, that's like going up the mountain, but coming down the mountain is the recovery side.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. I mean, first thing I have to say, mate, the caveat is I know you mentioned you're not a physiologist, and I'm certainly not a sleep physiologist. So I have to give a big shout out to a friend and colleague who really helped me with this. in terms of, the measurements and understanding sleep. So a guy called he's just recently passed his PhD, called Dr. Craig Thomas. And yeah, I'm really fortunate
Craig
that being
Thomas.
involved. Yeah, Craig
is
Thomas.
He in the US?
No, I don't think he might have a postdoc over there now. I don't think he is. But basically, the quick backstory with Craig. Craig has just completed a PhD on sleep and athletic populations. We're really lucky in John Moores, like I say, it's one of the top sports science institutions in the UK and one of the top 10 in the world. That similar. That I heard you talk about this when you last did your talk at the ACSM a couple of weeks ago. We have access to polysonography. We've got obviously actigraph measurements for sleep, and we've got a couple of guys who are kind of interested in the sleep space now. So Craig was kind of fundamental in coming and getting involved and kind of helping me to monitor the sleep in these guys. But what the measures that we basically done is very simple. We used actigraphy with these guys. So the one that we actually used was called, I think it was called the ActiWatch. It's by a UK. Yeah. It's a UK based one. I have to confess, mate, I have no idea whether they're any good or anything like that.
No, they are good, and they've been validated against. So that the classic way to validate these is against polysomnography, and the ActiWatch has been validated.
So that's what Craig told me. Craig was like, look, if we're if we're going to do field measurements, this is the best way to utilize it. So I mean, going back a little bit, I suppose regressing, I am hugely into the value of sleep. I cannot understate it myself. I know when I was an athlete, how important sleep was to me. In fact, I have to actually confess why I got interested in this stuff as well was, and I don't know if there's any research in this. This is something that I've been massively interested to see. Was the way I used to sleep, to be honest with you, mate, prior to competition, so the night before, was awful. And I really think it had a huge knock-on effect to how I competed in the latter stages of my career, because I just couldn't sleep. And then a lot of the strategies that we talk about now as well. I mean, I remember I come up with the amazing idea of leaving the lights on and raising the heat to try and make me more sleepy, and watching the television, and probably doing the anti-sleep strategy was what I was doing to try and get myself to sleep in terms of sleep hygiene. So I know the value of it, and even to this day, if I don't get into a decent pattern of sleep, it really affects me negatively. But yeah, going around the houses. So, like I say, part of my PhD was looking at weight making, and I become really interested in this concept around weight making of energy availability. So for those who aren't familiar about energy availability, very simply, we think about energy balance, and that's the energy that you intake minus the energy or the energy outtake, the energy that comes out. Energy availability is a concept where we look at the amount of energy left for primary physiological functions. So after we've used the energy for exercise and for moving about, how much have we got left for our organs to work and our brain to function and things like that? So we have these certain thresholds of energy availability now, where if we go below them, the hypothesis or the purported effect is that it starts to have a negative consequences on these physiological functions. And for those who work in combat sports, typically across a fight camp, you will be below the lowest energy threshold the entire time. And there's nothing you can really do about that, because in order to make weight, you've got to be below that threshold. So yeah, one of the things I was really interested in measuring throughout some of the research that I've done is sleep. And I was like, okay, what are the consequences of being in low energy availability? And then what are the consequences of, continued training, or, this continued training camp on sleep? So yeah, we got some really nice data. It's only in a case study. So it's only in a couple of different individuals, looking at things like, total sleep time, efficiency, latency, and stuff like that, from a point of view of not only the energy availability, but also, the training camp, and come up with some nice data, which Craig, originally we were going to put it in one big case study, but I think the sleep stuff's been so interesting in isolation that Craig's going to write it up for a case study, an individual case study himself.
Oh, And so just out of interest then, Carol, what sort of measures do you remember that you saw with those fighters in training camp? What's the average kind of sleep that you're getting per night?
Yeah, so funnily enough, I mean, I suppose the initial hypothesis for me was going to be, okay, we're going to see an effect of a reduction in energy availability. So the longer this goes on, we're going to see a reduction in it, we're going to see an effect on measures of or markers of sleep throughout the camp. And then obviously as the camp continues, we see in some of the classical sleep literature, like kind of training density and stuff as a real effect on sleep. So we were expecting that as well. So yeah, we used actigraphy. We did this for every single night throughout the entire 8 weeks. We also had kind of, I suppose, a control week. So we followed them in the week after they'd made weight and they'd competed. And then we did that in line with the consensus sleep diary as well. So Craig got both of those measures and then analysed it. And to be completely honest with you, mate, to our total surprise, despite the gradual reductions in energy availability, total sleep time was absolutely the same. There was no real, reduction of that. It was pretty much, I think I remember Craig saying that his sleep time was above 420 minutes, which I think
hours,
in a control group is pretty good. I think there's some stuff by John Lee there from EIS back in 2012 who looked at kind of like the a good average. And then crazily as well is sleep efficiency actually went up. It was above 85% at all time points, but we looked at the first 4 weeks and his sleep efficiency I think was about 88%. And then in the latter stages of the camp, leading into the weigh-in, his sleep efficiency actually increased to over 90%. I think it was about 92%. So yeah, remarkably, and again, this is obviously only limited data in a few individuals, but there doesn't seem to be any kind of negative effect of energy availability on the athlete's sleep. And we spoke to them about it as well. We were like, are you finding that this is having an effect? Are you finding that it's having a negative consequence? And a lot of them kind of mentioned that, funnily enough, the further I go into camp, I actually find myself sleeping better. It didn't really have any main effect. And then we looked at, those two factors, total sleep time and also total sleep efficiency across the weeks. And again, other than the actual training, I suppose, density, that was the only thing that really negatively affected sleep. When the training volume was quite high, that had a negative effect on potentially the way they'd sleep. And when it was a little bit lower, they slept better. So yeah, going around the houses there, mate, and probably not making a huge deal of sense for somebody who's in it.
It's really interesting, and a couple of things there to look at actually, which is interesting, is the sleep efficiency as it improves over time. What that means basically is that athletes fell asleep quicker. So when they went to bed, they were basically utilizing that time better, so they fell asleep quicker, and they also had less awakenings overnight as well. Now we would probably hypothesize that as we went into more of a fight camp, that awakenings would go up because of training volume / training volume. So the number of sessions that they're doing or the number of minutes that they spend training, and then also the intensity of that or the training load. But I think what may have happened there, Carl, is that the training load and the training volume, I would presume that you guys were managing that so well and just had these incremental improvements in terms of increasing the load, and it wasn't like a massive change or a massive delta where they went from an increase of 40% 1 week, and because you were gradually doing that and allowing for adaptation, it actually had minimal disruption on the sleep. That's what I would hypothesize what's going on there. Because what I see is what's happening in athletes is they basically go, right, I've got to fight in 6 weeks, let's fucking smash this. And they start on day 1, and day 1 to day 36 is just smashing it every day, 2 a day. And there's no ramp up period whatsoever. And they're just redlining then for 6 weeks.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, another thing with this as well, I have to, put a caveat. This wasn't just observational, a lot of this work, this was actually interventional. So this was part of that case study that I presented where we were controlling diet and we were giving them a training program and we were assessing energy availability. But I have to admit the couple of athletes that I have monitored have all been pretty good. when it comes to the sleeping habits. They broadly have pretty good sleep hygiene as well. About the only one who, and I'd probably go into this a little bit more shortly, is Molly. Molly has ADHD, so she struggles to get to sleep, most of the time anyway. So we've had to kind of work hard on coming up with some strategies for her to help her with her, with a sleep overall, because her bloody mind's going 10 to the dozen the majority of the time.
So what do you do there, Carl? Because we got a few other amateur athletes like that we deal with. So I'm just wondering, out of interest, what do you do with those guys?
Yeah, so I think it's, first of all, mate, I have to admit, Molly is just an absolute consummate professional. She's she's an absolute joy to work with. It's hard to take credit because she pretty much just listens and puts stuff into place. But all the type of sleep strategies that some of the great sleep physiologists kind of purport. So, we try and get her to focus on, towards the back end of the evening, maybe having a hot shower, trying to raise her temperature just a little bit. When she goes to bed, she has a little bit of a time where she does play on her phone, but then she'll put that down and she'll focus around, maybe reading a book, or having a conversation with a partner and things like that. And she's just got into a nice routine in terms of sleep hygiene, of creating an atmosphere that is more conducive to sleep. And I just don't think people understand how important that is, of getting into a solid routine that you can follow, that gets you to that point where, like you say, not just the amount of sleep that you have, but the quality and the efficiency of the sleep that you have is good. So it's been a tough process because, like most of us, Molly spends a long time on her phone, and I think a big strategy with that was like constantly being on a phone all the time and using that as a vehicle to fall to sleep. But we've just got into a pattern and a routine. And where it becomes really affected at its most is leading into obviously a fight itself, and a lot of that I think just comes down to the fight being on the fighter's mind. And I'm certainly not going to profess to say that we've got an athlete who sleeps perfectly leading into competition with Molly, because she doesn't. She has relatively poor sleep leading into the fight, but in camp she tends to do really well. But what I find really interesting as well, to be honest with you, Ian, is how life stresses can actually affect that. So if she's had a bad day in training, it affects her sleep. If anything's gone on, I remember leading up to the Lipsky fight when we had to go to Greenville, she was having some issues with a visa. She had a week where she had terrible sleep performance, just because this was obviously on her mind. So I think controlling a lot of the working in and around the social factors that are going on in an athlete's life, as well as the training factors, is something that's just not really considered. So yeah, those are some of the things that we've tried to delve into.
It'll be interesting as you track, with using Molly as an example again, to track over the next few fights, because all the words are going like she's in contention for a title, and when she starts to get these bigger fights and moves up the card, it'll be interesting to see if there's a difference there in terms of particularly the week before the fight with travel and jet lag, and then the big stage if she's main card or co-main event or fighting someone like a Valentina Shevchenko, who I know the guys on the Fight Disciples actually have a bit of a thing for, as they do for Joanna and Jacek. There's a bit of a love affair going on there. Some inappropriate comments, which I presume their partners listen to. But I'd be interested to see what happens with the sleep then, because I wonder if that changes. Like, that's another factor as well. It's going to change, because I think there's one thing getting into the UFC, and there's one thing having a few fights, which would be nerve-wracking for some people. But as they start climbing that ladder and moving up, more and more pressure. I've worked with a couple of fighters, and the media that they have to do the week before the fight is absolutely crackers. So it'd be very interesting to see how that would change.
Yeah, I mean, another one that is bizarre in this culture as well is a lot of them tend to share rooms. So I know working with MMA guys, it'll be like you get a certain allocation of rooms in terms of how many people can stay there, the coaches and stuff. And some fighters I work with, they'll have like the partner staying in the room with them, the best mate will be on the couch, the frigging guy who they befriended on the street about 2 hours earlier is sleeping on the floor. It's like, I mean, I exaggerate, but sometimes you come in and it's like literally a slumber party, and it's like, what the hell is going on? How can you sleep in this environment when you've got all these different distractions, And again, the one thing where Molly's great is leading into the event. She pretty much insists on, she needs the room to herself and it's her own space, and she needs to create an environment that's conducive to sleep. So no, it certainly helps, mate, when you've got somebody who understands the importance of sleep. It was funny actually that I don't know if you've been watching this new documentary on the basketball, the Chicago Bulls.
I have,
with Michael Jordan.
I've been watching.
Yeah, which is absolutely fantastic. And I was watching the section, where they were talking about Jordan having a potential gambling problem, and then they were like, he was going on and he was like, well, I was in a casino until 1 a.m., right, 2 a.m., and then I was home. I don't know how that's going to have a negative performance. And I was just generally thinking, I was like, well, did you get a good night's sleep? Do you know what I mean? With it, is it, would activity like that be conducive to sleep? So, no, I personally have always, again, mate, I'm literally, I always wanted to be in the military. My family's a big military family. I think pretty much everybody in the whole family on both sides, my mum and my dad's side, have been in the military apart from me and my little brother, because we decided on different paths. But I think I would have been useless in the military anyway, being honest with you, mate, because I love me sleep. There's one way. All you got to do to torture me is deprive me of sleep, and I'm non-operational. So for me, I've always been a big advocate of it anyway. And like you say, I think you bring your own biases into things, but I'm fortunate that a lot of the athletes that I'm working with at the minute see the value in that, and then allow us to do some of these measurements. But yeah, I think it's, like I say, it's not my area. I'm certainly no expert, but it's something that I really understand that we need to try and get it, monitor and get a handle on, in order to, like we were saying before, help the super compensation that we get from the training. Because the training is the training is the bullet, and the recovery is the gun. You know what I mean? It's like you need them in combination, and if one's not right, it just doesn't work.
No, look, I think the things you're doing there is absolutely bang on. I was on a podcast last year, a guy called Jordan Sullivan, who's got a site called The Fight Dietitian. He works with people.
Yeah, like, I was on that too. Yeah,
Adesanya and those guys, and I spoke to Jordan exactly about that same point that you're making. I said, the week of a fight, get all those hanger-oners out of the room. I said, you see it there on the countdown shows. I love watching countdown shows and embeddeds because I like to see the absolute ridiculousness and the bullshit that goes on before a fight. Look, I understand that fighters want to get around in groups and they want to have a bit of a laugh and they want to have their friends around them, but that bedroom should be sacred. You see some of these bedrooms, there's like 3 or 4 lads hanging over the bed, playing PlayStation, food everywhere. That's their sleeping environment. That's supposed to be their sanctuary where they can retreat, have some quiet time, have some downtime. They don't need to be kicking pizza boxes and dirty underwear off their bed because there's like 15 people in the room. That should be like, should be sacred for those guys.
No,
so
you're absolutely right. Another thing about the culture of this sport is it also tends to be, I know from the Olympic combat sports, when you go away, and again, I understand the financial implications of this, but you buddied up with people in rooms as well.
Yeah.
And that isn't always conducive to sleep. I know when I got to the latter part of my career, I started to insist on having a single room because it was like, I don't want to be around other people. You know exactly right in what you're saying. That needs to be an oasis, in the middle of a pretty crazy, experience that you go through leading into fight weeks. It needs to be a sanctuary, exactly like you've said, for you to get away and do your thing and follow your own routine. And no, like I say, Molly's brilliant. And I think at the beginning, because like I say, she is quite busy in her mind, she liked having a lot of people around to give her distraction. And I think we didn't particularly mind that because the distraction was actually a good thing. She needed that to get her away. But now she's becoming a bit more of a professional. Well, she's becoming more considered in her approach, and she's understanding that it is building up to these bigger fights and stuff. She's starting to get really, really smart in how she deals with it. And yeah, I'm over the moon that, in the days leading into the fight, she's like, right, everyone get the fuck out. This is my room and this is what I need to do. It's all about me now and all about my preparation, which is great. And
rightly so.
She's got such a good team around and no one begrudges it as well. So sorry there, mate, I interrupted you.
No, I was just saying, and rightly so. You know, it's so good for her. And I think just on that point as well, like just, you know, around the importance of sleep, but also as well, like I find this when I was at the AIS or when I'm down at the Super Rugby team or with basketball teams, it's really interesting. Like you'll go in between sessions and you'll talk to them, you know, and they'll have these big, like, you know, these big like pads on their legs that are inflating to help with circulation. They'll be wearing compression gear. They'll be jumping in and out of hot baths and cold baths and putting ice on and getting massage. And then they're only sleeping like 5.5, 6 hours a night because I'm measuring their sleep. And I'm like, if we look at your kind of model there, Carl, that you put up about, you know, about aerobic conditioning being like nearly being the base of for physiological training and support adaptation to a fight, no matter what type of fighter you want to be, having that aerobic base is really important, like the kind of base of the pyramid. If we look at the base of the pyramid, then for recovery, sleep is that base. And what I find really interesting is that it's free. Anybody can avail of it. You don't have to be in a certain bracket, a certain sex, gender, whatever, or have to pay for it. And people don't do it. But people are willing to go out and spend hundreds, if not thousands of dollars over the course of a year on massage and all these other things. I'm not saying that they're not helpful and appropriate, because they are, but it's just in terms of you want to spend more time on those things and less time on the things that can really help you. Like I said to an athlete one time, I should just start charging you $100 for every hour of sleep and just watch you, because I reckon then you'd pay me and you'd do it. Because you'll buy all this other shit and do all this other stuff, but you won't actually do what you need to do. You're only sleeping 5.5 hours a night. You need to dramatically improve that sleep.
Yeah,
you know, it's absolutely crazy what people do.
You're right. You're right. I mean, this is something that we teach to the students at the university. It baffles me how people just immediately want to reach for all the sexy stuff and just ignore the very, very basic, simple premises. I mean, like I say, with Molly, mate, it hasn't been, there's nothing, you know, I think people look at it from the outside in and they go, oh, well, you know, John Moores, it must be some really newfangled research, or there must be some new approaches, or they must have access to a lot of, you know, cool, nifty kit. And don't get me wrong, we do some of that stuff, but some of the biggest changes we made were simply just, let's get you sleeping better. Let's get you eating better. Let's control what you eat. Let's control a little bit more around how you train and how you recover. And I mean, literally, I mean, we've only just started. I mean, people say this to me all the time, you know, from a nutritional point of view. It's like, oh, you know, what type of supplements do you have Molly on, you know, for performance? And it's like, none. And people look at you and go, what do you mean, none? You're like, she isn't on any yet. And you're like, well, no, come on, you must have her on this and that. And I'm like, well, no, because there was no point in even worrying about any of that shite until we got a routine right with the food in the first place, until we managed to get that formula where she's able to make weight comfortably. You know, so like the first camp was just eating well in you know, nice time phases and getting her to make weight. The second camp we did it and we played around with it a little bit more and she made weight. The camp that we did for Boston, we started bringing in some carbohydrate periodization. The next one we do, we might then start playing around with supplements. Supplements are the last thing to worry about, you know. And then very similar to what you've said, you know, people are like, oh, you know, does she get massage and does she get the? And it was like, well, she does when she needs it, but other than that, it's, you know, time between sessions, it's recovery between sessions, how she recovers, and sleeping bloody well. Other than that, you know, all the sexy stuff is as and when. It's not, you know, it's like you said, that's the top of the pyramid, not the bottom. 110%.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I just had this spinal surgery recently where I had my vertebrae fused, you know, and when I had some issues and I wasn't going to jiu-jitsu, or I was going in and just like rolling with guys that were smaller and so on, guys were always like, oh, hey, you should, you know, have you considered getting stem cells? I'm like, oh, really? How does that work? Oh, I don't know, but I just heard that stem cells would work. It's like, okay, you should go to a chiro. I'm like, oh, and what's the chiro know about my neck? How would that work? Oh, I don't know. You should just like go. I'm like, man, I've got bad arthritis. Genetics are playing a part here. My spine is basically narrowing. Plus, I got a bunch of herniated discs. And plus, I'm 17 years older than you, and I've had the shit kicked out of me too many times. So that's why I have to get it done. I said, so stop listening to Joe Rogan. Stop saying stem cells and get out of my face.
Yeah, I know. It is. It's always like people are always looking for that. Like I say, they're looking for the 0.0001% instead of the basic things that we know are gonna, make the biggest percentage differences. But a lot of that does come from, like you say, we live in a digital age, and there's a lot of. I mean, I almost feel sorry for a lot of people these days, mate, having to wade through all the bullshit that actually comes with
Yeah.
social media. So it's not I always say, back in the day, I wasn't misinformed. I wasn't informed at all. But I actually think it's probably even more harder for people these days because it's not that they're not informed, that they're probably over-informed on things that, one, like you say, they don't understand about, and two, they just don't know how to utilize or put together. But yeah, it sounds a bit crap as a sports scientist sometimes as well when you have conversations with these people and they're like, oh, what? It was funny actually. I had a conversation with somebody the other day. What works? Well, not a lot really, unfortunately. And they're like, "What do you mean nothing works?" Well, this has been, and you're like, "Have you actually read that study? It was in rats. The significance was pretty low, and as far as I can tell, the translation to human trials yet is a good while away. And people are just so much looking to hang the hat on stuff that we're nowhere near in terms of what works. And it's kind of like the like say from the nutrition space, especially in combat sports, the creatine with a creatine for like brain health and things like that.
Yeah.
We're nowhere near that. A lot of the research that's actually being done is in like animal models, and yes, it's promising, and yes, it's exciting, and yes, I hope it works. But people coming up with these protocols, oh, you need to do this now, and you need to take that, and you need to take the other. You're like, have you even read into this? Are you even informed about what you're trying to tell people about? But I suppose one of the biggest things around all that, mate, is everyone's an expert in coronavirus these days, so no surprise.
Well, that's very interesting that you do say that, Carl, because I have a YouTube video that I'll send you after this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we can just summarize the whole field of epidemiology, virology, and medicine in a 20-minute YouTube clip. So I'll send that to you, and you can look into it.
Brilliant. Yeah.
On that topic as well, I think if we were to do everything that we were supposed to do, yoga, strength and conditioning, run triathlons, take supplements, we'd be training 6 times a day, and I'd be dragging around a shopping trolley full of supplements as well. And I wouldn't even go to work. So, if you were to put all these things down, because I remember having this conversation about 2 years ago on the mats after training one day, and somebody was asking me, well, what's the best way to train? And and everybody was chipping in that this kind of circle form. And I went, all right, let's look at all the things you want to do. You want to go to yoga, you want to lift weights, you want to do triathlons, you want to do HIIT sessions, you want to do kickboxing, you want to do wrestling, you want to do jiu-jitsu, you want to do cryotherapy, you want to go to the sauna, you want to have cold water exposure as well, and you want to do meditation. Like, what? Do you have a job? Do you have family? Like, that's only the stuff you're doing. Now let's look at all the other things you want to do. Chiropractor, massage, this vitamin, that vitamin, stem cells, TRT.
Yeah.
How much does that cost, right? Now let's look at what time you got left for your job. None. What time you got left for your family? None. And how old are you? 36. The chances of you becoming a professional athlete and taking out a UFC middleweight title is probably slim to none. So I suggest you probably focus on your job and maybe go and, maybe get an undergraduate degree in sports science if you want.
Yeah, like you say, what makes me laugh about all that stuff is it's meant to enhance recovery. It does make me laugh. It's kind of like got 2 hours between sessions, and then, like I say, they go and do some contrast therapy, and then they go and have a massage, and then they go and do this, and it's like, oh shit, I've got to train again now. And you're like, yeah, I bet you wish you'd have just gone home, had a good meal, maybe even have a nap,
Exactly,
or just chilled out, let the mind recover. It's like, come on, man. It's just, but no, I think it's as you know, mate, there's no magic formula. I think everybody's an individual. You've just got to try and find a way that gets with the individuals. And look, I'm super, super lucky with the guys I work with. They just seem to really not submit, because one of the things that I always like to say to the guys we work with is that we want to try and educate them on how to do this stuff. Some of them don't. They just want to be told what to do. And, you've got to really think, I think it's becoming really prevalent, behavior change and how you work with certain individuals and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm lucky that a lot of them who we work with, first of all, just kind of submit and go, you tell me what to do and I'll do it. And then after a period of time, start to become informed. And like I say, Molly is a brilliant example. Whenever we decide to do something now, it's a discussion, and she'll go, okay, so why are we doing it? What are the benefits? What are the pros? What are the cons? Is it worth it? And she's just so well informed and great about that. So yeah, I'm the lucky one in terms of looking with an athlete like that, because she doesn't just blindly follow and do what we tell her to do. She asks questions, but if the evidence base is there and the pros outweigh the cons, then she goes in for it 100%, which is great.
Excellent. Carl, we've been going for nearly an hour and a half now, and I know you're a busy man, and it's getting towards sleep time here in Perth in Western Australia. So I want to thank you very much for being on the podcast today. If people want to get in touch with you, if there's any athletes out there or any people that want to do some research with you or just get in contact with you and pick your brain, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
Yeah, no, I've a couple of different ways. So if people want to get in touch with me directly, they can just email me. You go straight to my work email at c.langan-evans. That's all one word, if you can manage to spell that is. So c.langan-evans at ljmu.ac.uk. I am on Twitter with the Twitter handle, and it's a disgrace that I have to check this every time, at CLE SPOSCI, SPOSCI, and I'm also on Instagram as, again, I have to check this, Coach Carl Evans. So there you go.
There you go. We'll have all those in the show notes there, so you can just scroll down there in the show notes on your phone and click on those. But make sure to follow Carl and check him out. Carl, thank you very much for being on today. I really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me on, mate. It's been an absolute pleasure, and looking forward to more of the work that you guys are putting out in the sleep space as well. It's really valuable.
Cheers.